Hello everyone, my name is Sam.
And I'm Jacob, and welcome to Geeking Out About It.
Now, this week we have a very special topic that I am very happy to be talking about. It is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Truly one of my favorite TV shows, and as a kid I made my parents watch it front to back multiple times. Absolutely love it.
Now, before we give away too much information about the show, I'm going to throw this to Jacob with a quick 2-minute history.
Avatar: The Last Airbender has to be considered one of the most successful children's TV shows of our time. In the show there are 4 nations: water, earth, fire, and air, each with a bending style, allowing them to control that element. The show originally aired from 2005 to 2008 with 61 episodes in total. The creators of this series were Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino, and they are responsible for the show's amazing storyline and character development. What makes Avatar special is that they did a lot of research before creating a show with Eastern Asian influence to make sure that they weren't appropriating the certain cultures. For example, the Fire Nation originally featured all Japanese art styles and cultural influence, which was changed because the creators didn't want the evil of the Fire Nation associated with the Japanese. Many other efforts like this were taken, affording the show its beautiful artistic styles. The 2 creators and Nickelodeon, the owners of the Avatar series, had South Korean studios JM Animation, DR Movie, and MOI Animation produce the show. The show was conceived in 2001 when Konietzko took a sketch of an old man and imagined him as a child. And he drew that individual herding bison in the sky. Showing that sketch to DiMartino, who was watching a documentary about explorers trapped at the South Pole at the time, they were inspired to create Avatar. The show took many influences from art and religion in its creation, things such as Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and yoga. Each element and its nation took influences in its creation with the help of Sifu Kisu of the Harmonious Fist Chinese Athletic Association as a consultant for the bending styles. The Earth Kingdom was influenced by the powerful stances of Hung Gar, the Fire Nation influenced by Northern Shaolin for its use of strong arm and leg movements, the Water Tribes influenced by Tai Chi with its focus on alignment and breathing, and the Air Nomads influenced by Bagua for the dynamic movements it had. The show is truly a great success. And with that, back to Sam.
Thank you so much for that quick 2-minute history, Jacob. Now, diving into our next segment, we're going to be discussing a little bit of the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, just to give you a basis of what's even going on. So, Avatar itself is a very interesting and kind of compact world. There is a lot going on, and there's a lot of variable things.
Yeah.
And so with that, you see the 4 different nations, and the 4 different nations are water, earth, fire, and air. And that happens to be the same cycle as the Avatar state, which is the title card of the show. Now, the different nations have very different types of cultures and geographic stances and a lot of different types of ways of how they interact with their specific element. Now, starting things off with the Water Nation, as the cycle would have began, it is based on the Inuit peoples, and it is a very kind of variable type of society. In the show, we see a north and a south. The north side is a very structured and well put together. It is a militarized kind of feel. Everything is a large city basis. And in the south, we see a very different nomadic kind of sections of hunter and gatherers that are spread apart. And it's interesting to see the differences in the own culture from that. And the water bending style is very much based on Tai Chi. And it's a very flowy kind of thing, just like water.
Right, they're very fluid in their behavior, how they act with one another, and it's very personal. Mm-hmm. And off of that, we have the Earth Kingdom. Now, their bending style is based on a mix of Hung Ga and of tiger and crane animal styles of Kung Fu. Now, the Earth Nation drew a lot of its influences from different Chinese bits of their culture. And then, you know, we see they have a much more rooted foundation. You know, they're not nomadic. They establish their towns and their trade routes, and they have large cities. And, you know, we see some of their buildings influenced, for example, like from the Great Wall of China and the Forbidden Palace, we see large structures. They move Earth around, right? And they're very much about how they interact with each other and the Earth, and their biome is huge. Right? They have the largest nation,
Yes.
And they have everything from wetlands to desert, and they learn how to work with every one of those biomes and how to live and survive in them. And we see, you know, a lot of tea and medicine come from the Earth Nation as well.
And that is very kind of different. The size relativity is different from the Fire Nations, which are a bunch of islands. And they are kind of a volcanic region, which is very much touching on the fact that they are a very hot-headed society that live in a hot place. And it's interesting to see they are based off of Japan. And stylistically, a lot of their kind of culture and things like that are very well rooted in Japan. And they are one of the most interesting nations to interact with throughout the show because they are portrayed as the antagonists. But the Fire Nation itself has some very unique individuals that are not themselves bad guys. And it's super interesting to see all of that development. And thematically, it's very interesting because their fighting style is a origin of a lot of the other fighting styles, and it's very rooted with the strong kind of movements of the fire and the ferocity of their culture.
Right, and a great juxtaposition to that is the Air Nation, which they're much more wafting, right? They have these temples that are high in the mountains, and they're much smaller groups of people that live together, much smaller cities, and we see them as very passive. They don't want to hurt anything. They're all about how you live with your environment, and we see that, you know, they have a lot of Tibetan influence in their styles, and their fighting style comes from Baga, which is very much about the hand movements and the flow of what you're doing. And we see that, you know, their nation gets attacked very, very violently, and they're taken out. They're not necessarily the strongest benders, but they are very good at what they do, and they live, they enjoy their life. They're more simple.
And a lot of aspects of this world and how they interact with each other leads us into some very interesting characters and people to interact with that guide you through this world, which leads us into our next segment, the lineup. Now, in this segment, we will be talking about characters from Avatar: The Last Airbender with images to refer to those characters. So, the characters we will be discussing are Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, Zuko, Iroh, and Azula. Now, to start things off, we have Aang. Now, Aang is the title character of the show. He is the Last Airbender. And Aang himself is a very young kid who is destined for greatness by being the selected avatar. And what it means to be the avatar is that you are the chosen one who is able to use all of the elements. Normally, you are only capable of bending one of the elements, that being water, earth, fire, or air. But Aang is able to use all of the elements, and he has to learn how to use each of them in order to become the person that he's meant to be and stop the war from happening. The main concept of the show is that there is a massive war between the Fire Nation and the rest of the nations, and Aang is trying to put a stop to that. And there is a lot of different types of things going on with that, and it's super fun to see him as he grows more mature throughout the show. Because he starts off very kind of, I'm just going to go mess around for a bit, but then he learns that he has to do certain types of things, and he is a very fun character.
Right, he starts off just with his airbending, and he's actually not the first character that we see on screen. Katara and Sokka are the first two characters that we see, and Katara is, I'll talk about her for a moment. We have a very strong female figure here. Yes. She is predominant throughout the entire series, and then went on to have her own series as well after The Last Airbender. And so, sorry, that was Korra, not Katara. My bad.
She is in both of them,
She is
however.
in both of them,
And
though.
she did have her own comic series that ran for a little bit, but
right.
yeah.
So she's a very strong female character. She's almost motherly to Aang, as she is the one that, with Sokka, finds him in the first episode and sets up the story. And she travels throughout the entire series with Aang. And she's also a very good waterbender. And she learns a lot of skills as she's going about this, and which is very different from her brother, Sokka.
Now, yeah, one name we keep saying is Sokka. Now, Sokka is the resident comedian. Look at this guy's face. He is not amused with you right now. Now, Sokka is super fun. He is the pretty much only character in the show that is a mainliner who doesn't have any bending whatsoever. He is just a guy in it with his sister to try and protect her. Now, Sokka is a kind of, how would I say this? He's not very smart, but at the same time, he's pretty smart. He figures things out. He uses his trusty boomerang and he throws that thing around, and it is very fun to see Sokka do things because Sokka always does something that is very unique and completely different from what anyone else would have even thought of.
Right, Sokka really makes it lighter, and he brings this, he's a crybaby in certain situations. He brings this drama to all the events that happen that really liven them up and make them real. Now, he has a problem with Toph, who's also a very strong female character in the show. And now she is a blind earthbender, and she's one of the more powerful earthbenders that we see. And this is when we first see the form of earthbending that is inspired by the tiger form of Kung Fu, which is really interesting. And she's trying to escape from her parents.
And she uses the Aang and Katara and Sokka as a gateway to do that. And she helps Aang learn how to earthbend. She becomes his earthbending teacher. And very similarly throughout the show, we see Katara be the teacher for Aang on how to waterbend. And you see them grow into the different aspects of that as everyone's trying to help Aang along with this journey. And Toph is very much a very beneficial character throughout the show that helps him learn how to do things. Also, we have Zuko, who is another person who helps Aang learn how to firebend. But he doesn't start off that way. We see Zuko's arc turn from something that is incredibly, it's probably my favorite character progression that's ever happened in any TV show ever. Zuko himself starts off as the antagonist of the show. He is the guy who is hunting down Aang to try and capture him and bring back his honor for his family and everything throughout the show. And he is very aggressive, and he's hot-headed, and he's super impatient, but we see him grow as a character. And throughout the different seasons, we see him trying to find what his honor actually means to him, and how he can even regain that. And in the end, he ends up joining Aang and helping him learn firebending. And it is super, like, oh man, I can't even explain to you how incredible this guy's arc is. You have to watch it for yourself to understand what I'm talking about.
Right, and Zuko is an incredible story arc. And with Zuko, we have Uncle Iroh, who is pretty much the only family member that even wants anything to do with Zuko, and travels with him and helps him on this hero's arc. Because for every hero, you need to have an old wise man that loves tea to follow you around, and Uncle Iroh fills that role perfectly. Because whenever Zuko is having a moment, when he's being hot-headed, Uncle Iroh is sitting there with a Chinese board game or a cup of tea, and he spouts out a pearl of wisdom, or he's like, hey dude, you need to calm down. This is how you deal with it. But just because he's kind and wise and old doesn't mean he's not powerful. He's an extremely powerful firebender, and he's learned to control that and not have to use rage to firebend and be very good at it.
Now, I love the fact that you mentioned words of wisdom from Iroh, because one of my favorite moments through the show is when Zuko's talking to himself, saying, what would Iroh say?
Right.
You know, he's like, oh, what would my uncle say? And he says it, and he's like, that is totally what my uncle would say, and I just called myself an idiot.
Right, and then we have these funny bits like delicious tea, or delectable tea, or deadly poison.
Yes.
And we just have, there's these funny bits with Iroh that make him a really powerful role model and comedic relief for when Zuko's on screen.
Sometimes in life, you just need a little bit of Uncle Iroh to help you out. And
right.
I think I need an Uncle Iroh too.
I definitely need one.
Some part of Iroh that is very different from everything else is that he was probably one of the most powerful people in the show, which is also reflected by their family, and Zuko and Ozai and Iroh and Azula. Now, Azula becomes the main antagonist of the show, and she is a very powerful force not to be trifled with.
Right.
And it leads into some very interesting things because she is very smart and she is very tactical about how she approaches things, and she is able to take on most things.
She's
Her
very precise.
Fire is a completely different color from most of the other benders because she has more powerful flame. And it is super insane to think that she can just do all of these things. She's very capable, and she is way more powerful than Zuko, and when she's hunting Zuko, you can see that. But that's all the time we have to talk about these characters. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why Avatar: Last Airbender still holds up.
So I first heard about Oh Man through the radio program. My roommate was a DJ, and I hopped on his show a couple times, and that was infatuating, and I immediately fell in love with being able to play whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and coming in late at night and sharing my music with whoever was awake at that time was just so exciting and so liberating. Just the ability to explore and learn so many things from so many different mediums is really what benefited me and my experience here in media. Coming out of here, I definitely think I'm going to be looking at the world in a more professional lens. I definitely think that, working as part of a team and making things for other people is something that I've definitely taken out of being here and being on the creative video team especially. My name is Ziad Al-Kaulak. I'm a creative video consultant, a senior studio engineer, and a professional conspirator here at Orange Media Network.
Welcome back. Now, we would like to talk a little bit about why Avatar: The Last Airbender still holds up. It has some serious staying power. Now, this show has a lot of things going for it that are very different from other Nickelodeon shows and other shows from our childhood that just aren't as good anymore.
Right. So I think when we talk about cartoons, because this is originally a child's cartoon, when we talk about cartoons, there are story arcs, there are morals and themes and lessons to be learned, but we find that a lot of them are numbed. They're numbed so much that, it's all light and fuzzy, like Bob the Builder, it's unrecognizable, all the episodes are the same, right? Or we talk about Danny Phantom, it was good as a kid, but if we watch it as an adult, it's not as good because it doesn't have the adult lessons in it still. It's not real. And with Avatar: The Last Airbender, we see that the story is real. There isn't numbing to it. There's actual, there's real life questions to be answered, and we see some violence that you wouldn't see in a normal children's TV show, and that's because Nickelodeon said to the creators, yeah, we're going to kind of give you your space, and we're going to let you do your thing, and I think that boded really well for the show, and it's part of why it has staying power, because it is so adult, but it is watchable for kids too.
And it very much does play to some very dark themes throughout the show. We see some things that we wouldn't regularly see in kids' shows. Like we see warfare, we see the kind of aspects of extinction of a people. We see a lot of different types of things. We see some very mature themes throughout this show. And I'm for one, am a very big fan of how they treated a lot of this stuff. And I think it's why it's so able to come back and I can watch it and learn from it around every corner. And another aspect of staying power is Iroh himself giving those words of wisdom.
Right, and with Uncle Iroh, we have Zuko. And, yes, in other TV shows, there's anger, there's bitterness, but not in the way that we see Zuko. We see Zuko actually struggle. We see true anger. We see true despair. We see him kicked out of his own family and his father disown him. And we actually get to see the story behind that. And there's a real lesson in there.
And we see growth in all the characters, and we see development of different types of aspects, and we as a viewer are brought along with them. So every time you watch the show, every time you go back and you see it another time, you just feel an emotional connection with these characters. And from that, you learn a lot. You learn a lot through the eyes of Zuko or Aang or Katara as they go through different difficult types of things. Like we see a lot with episodes where Katara is dealing with the fact that she wants revenge, but she knows that she shouldn't, and Zuko knowing that he wants to regain his honor, but that's sacrificing what? There's a lot of different types of things that are very variable and different.
Right, and we truly see that Avatar has real story and morals, stuff that I can still learn from today. And I think that's part of why I love it, is that even today I can watch that and have good reminders of what I'm supposed to do. And like Uncle Iroh's pearls of wisdom, you can learn from them. So with that, let's go into some of our favorite episodes. Now I know you've prepared some, I've prepared some, so why don't you go ahead and take this away?
All right, just like Disney, I couldn't help resist, but I have to talk about my favorite episodes of Avatar: Last Airbender because they are so important to me as a man who has grown up watching this show, and I absolutely adore it. So starting things off with my third favorite episode, I have The Library. Now, The Library is Season 2, Episode 10, and this episode dives into a bit of a different aspect of the show, which is trying to figure out what to do next. Throughout the show, they're constantly moving from one thing to the other, and in this one, they're trying to find out what they should even do to take on the Fire Nation. And so Sokka chooses for his little bit of vacation to go to Washitong's library, and they're looking for it in the Earth Kingdom. And it is a very interesting episode because of the aspect of there's a lot to be talked about, and there's some different philosophies that are thrown out there about what's right and what's wrong. And the episode itself has a very shocking ending. With Appa being captured and taken away, and it's a very powerful episode.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my favorites off of that, with talking about powerful episodes, is Zuko alone. So we see Zuko put in this lone wolf situation when he's in a town that he's not comfortable in, and no one really wants him there. Like, they're not happy with the fact that he's there, and he doesn't want to be there either, but he's in isolation, and he has to learn to deal with that and how to get out of the situation. He has to sit with himself and contemplate his emotions and his feeling and what's going on for him. And we don't see Uncle Iroh by his side the entire time helping him out. And this is where we see Zuko take steps in creating his own future and his own story without having someone there to hold his hand.
Yeah, and that I too also adore that episode. I almost put it on my list.
It's a good one.
But my next episode is Appa's Lost Days. Now this is Season 2, Episode 16, and it might be a little bit later, but it picks up immediately where the library takes off. Now this episode is all about what happened to Appa. And Appa's journey, Appa is the sky bison that travels with Aang. For all of you who don't know, we haven't addressed that. But Appa is a very lovable creature, and he is he's beautiful in his own right. And Appa is taken away from Aang, and you just see the animal abuse happen throughout this episode, and it's a very dark theme. It's one of those episodes that we're talking about that this show has some dark themes, and this episode very much plays into that, and it is super interesting to watch what even happened, and you see a lot of the darker aspects through the eyes of this animal. Instead of through the eyes of a character, which would normally verbalize what's going on, you only can see it through the emotions and the impact that's happening to him. But
I completely love that as well, but not everything in Avatar is serious and full of mystery and moral. We have the King of Omashu, where we have Bumi. And Bumi is awesome. He's an old friend of Aang's. Aang used to hang out there 100 years ago before he was frozen in ice. And so Bumi has become king of this Earth Kingdom city, and they have so much fun. Bumi takes him in, messes with him, Katara, and Sokka, and that's when they learn to have really good teamwork with each other for the first time. They really learn to come together as a group, and I think that's a very important lesson that they learned with Bumi, as well as getting to meet Bumi, who's a light-hearted character and so funny.
yeah, and moving on to my favorite episode, which has to be The Puppet Master. Now, The Puppet Master is the darkest episode in the show. It has to be. This is where we learn about bloodbending, which is a very unique ability that waterbenders technically have, but not everyone can do it. And bloodbending, you can literally manipulate the person. And it is a creepy episode. It is easily the scariest episode throughout the show, and that's why I love it so much.
That is easily the scariest episode. I couldn't pick a top, but the City of Walls and Secrets is really good because I enjoy how ominous it is. They go into the city and they're like, oh yeah, we've always been at war. What are you talking about? And so it really brings in intrigue, and it's a lesson for Aang to learn to investigate and to dig deeper, and then not to trust everyone. Not everything is as it seems.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into our next segment, which we will be talking about the philosophies of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Well, audio, man, it's in the air. It's the fluctuations that vibrate our ear holes and make the cochlea sensitive, you can't ignore it, and you try to start measuring it, and it just pulls you in. Well, I used to try to play music on my own, make the sounds from my own hands and instruments. Then I started recording. Upon hearing myself in my recordings, I decided I should just record. When you're a young adult who is serious about pursuing media as a career or even a side hustle, a lot of people won't take you seriously. OMN is cool because not only will they take you seriously, they'll push you and they'll give you all the tools to really try to do something special with it and let you be creative about it. And so that's what's been special about OMN to me. I'm Sam Lay, and I'm a student engineer at Orange Media Network.
Welcome to the spirit world. Look at that production value.
It's beautiful. We got some fog in here.
So in this segment, we will be discussing a bit of the philosophies of each nation and kind of the overall setting of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, the 4 different nations have a lot of different stances based on where they're located geographically and based on how their element interacts with each person. Now, water bending is a very interesting element because it is all about the flow, but it has a lot of different types of aspects of what it can accomplish, such as healing someone or overall just freezing something or doing a lot of different types of things with it. It is a very useful tool. And the nation itself has a philosophy of benevolence, and they are kind to one's other.
True. And off of this, we have the benevolence of the Water Kingdom, and then we have the strength of the Earth Kingdom. Now, the Earth Kingdom is very rooted in who they are and what they do, and they're very, in lack of better ways, strong people, right? They're very much grounded, and even in their stance and their fighting style, you see, they put their feet apart. They're strong. They use what they have available to them.
Yes.
To create monumental things, including their cities and their buildings and in the way that they fight.
And similarly to the Earth Nation, which is all about the strength of that, the Fire Nation is also kind of about the strength, but it's more leaning towards the ferocity of it. They are a very aggressive and powerful nation, and their people is very much reflective of that. And you see a lot of these characters and such from the Fire Nation be that kind of leniency of that aggressiveness and that kind of inner fire, but that doesn't mean that it is all about that, because it can bring warmth and life and overall rejuvenation. And it's interesting throughout the show that you see some very variable philosophies coming from characters from the Fire Nation that pull from different nations themselves.
Yeah, and a great juxtaposition to the Fire Nation is the Air Nation. As we talked about before, they're very peaceful people. They are about the flow of life, living with what you have, and they're very, not ambivalent. They're very kind.
Passive.
They're passive, yeah. They're very passive, and they don't really fight if they don't have to. They're evasive.
And it's
They're
fun
very
watching
evasive.
Aang just not even fight at all. He just kind of dodges things most of the episodes.
Right, and most of the episodes, he's using air to not have to fight.
It's all about maneuverability of one's soul and one's body.
Right, and I think, overall Avatar has this beautiful story arc about finding yourself and really becoming who you are. And with that is all we have for tonight's episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you tune in next week as we talk about another topic. Also, check out more content by KBVR TV and check out our YouTube page, where all the full episodes will be posted. If you want to keep up with the show and the rest of KBVR TV's awesome productions, you should also check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, where we post constant updates and tons of extra content. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.